class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be discussing some of the training camp cuts and players who actually avoided being cut, as the Sharks right now have 32 players still with them on the roster. Most of these players were returned either to their junior team, to Europe, or mostly with the Barracuda. So the first three notable players actually who were cut in this massive cut of players were Joachim Blichfeld, Ivan Chekovich, and Sasha Chmelevski. Now I'm sure these are the three players that most surprise Sharks fans and most disappoint Sharks fans having been cut. Well, Blichfeld was pretty good. He had some moments where he showed up, but I thought it was somewhat clear through the rookie tournament and the preseason games that he played that he wasn't necessarily someone who was 100% ready for the NHL. I feel as though if he was playing against real NHL defensemen, he wouldn't have so many opportunities. So I can definitely see him as a good reason to go down to the AHL. Now, Chekovich and Chmelevski, I think in particular, were two players most people had hopes with, and a lot of people were also sort of thinking, oh, it's either going to be Chekovich in the top six or Chmelevski. Chmelevski in particular, I thought was quite unimpressive throughout basically every single time that I saw him play. There was absolutely nothing that really stood out for me in the 4 or 5 games that I saw him play. So him going to the AHL is not a surprise at all. I thought Chekovich, he was injured for a good chunk of the rookie tournament. He played one preseason game, which was pretty good, but I can also see why he'd get sent to the AHL. So it's certainly disappointing. These three players, neither of them managed to actually make the team, which it was predicted that one of them likely would. But I guess it's not too bad to have them with the Barracuda. Another player who was an interesting cut, Noah Gregor, who I thought was quite strong during the rookie tournament. He looked pretty good during the preseason game that I saw him play. And so I thought he was going to be a real option to be that fourth line center. But it seems as though Alex True has surpassed Noah Gregor. And so he now finds himself in the AHL. A final cut, this one not so much of a surprise. I didn't really expect Helge Walks to actually be able to make the team out of training camp, even if his preseason game was quite good. The first one that I saw, I did not get to see the Vegas Golden Knights one, where he also was playing in that one, so I don't know how strong he was there. But I'm basically just to say that I thought he was quite impressive, so while he's not making the team this year, I think he's someone to potentially keep an eye on. Players who are actually still on the Sharks roster. We start with Lean Bergman, who has seemingly impressed the Sharks brass very heavily. Not only has he been pretty good offensively, he is also a forward who can play on the penalty kill. He's relatively responsible defensively, which is of course something that DeBoer loves. And so I can definitely see Bergman being able to find himself in a bottom 6 spot. Johnny Brodzinski, on the other hand, not really a surprise to still be with the team here. He's likely a pretty popular option to be able to potentially move into the top 6. Him and Lukáš Radil are, of course, the two main candidates in my mind. But Brodzinski still being here, not too much of a surprise. He looked pretty good in the preseason game I saw him play as well. Someone who was a surprise to still be with the team is Daniil Yurtakin. So he didn't look great during the rookie tournament. He had his moments, and he did look pretty strong in the first preseason game, but I was still surprised to still see him be here. I still don't think there's going to be much of a chance for him to actually being able to make the team out of training camp, but it is still impressive to find himself with the roster still. Manuel Wiederer, he was also very good in the first preseason game that the Sharks did play, which I guess is his reward, is being able to still be with the team. Again, it seems as though it's a long shot. The Sharks at fourth line center are quite backed up. They have Goodrow, who can certainly play it, Alex True, Dylan Gambrell. They've got now Lean Bergman, who seems to be the front runner if they really need a fourth line centerman. So I don't think Wiederer is actually going to have much of a chance either, but notable that he's still here. Mario Ferraro is actually a very interesting keep for the San Jose Sharks, as he could potentially find himself as a seventh defenseman, if not even making the Sharks' main roster to start this season. It's been rumored that Shemek would not be ready for the return of the regular season. He will not be ready for October 2nd against the Golden Knights, and Mario Ferraro may just end up being the Sharks' best option to put in. Of course, it would be Burns and Vlasic, Dillon and Carlson as the top four, and then you're choosing between Heed, you're choosing between Prout, and you're choosing between Ferraro. And Ferraro, maybe not a better option than someone like Tim Heed, but as a left-handed defenseman, he may be the option over someone like Dalton Prout. So it's certainly a possibility that Ferraro does find himself in the main lineup. He looked quite good in the rookie tournament at times. His preseason has been somewhat up and down, but all in all, the Sharks brass seems to be rather impressed with him. And so don't be surprised if you do find him with the Sharks for that first regular season game. Finally, Ryan Merkley still finds himself with the San Jose Sharks. Some might say it's because he doesn't really have a junior team to go back to. Ryan Merkley, of course, played in the first preseason game. I thought he was pretty impressive, honestly, but I can definitely see why DeBoer would maybe say some more negative things in the media about him, especially since with a player like Merkley, you don't want to inflate his ego necessarily by saying, oh, he was such a great player, because that's been a problem with Merkley. So sort of not insulting him, but not praising him in the media is likely a smart move. Now, Merkley has not played a preseason game since that first one. I suspect he should get another or two in the near future. I don't think he has as much of a high chance of making the team as Mario Ferraro does. I think while Ferraro doesn't have the offensive upside, nearly the offensive upside of Ryan Merkley, he is a more complete player who likely won't cost the Sharks as much defensively as Merkley might. So while we should see a couple more preseason games from Merkley, hopefully, unless he is insanely impressive, we likely won't find him with the Sharks, and it'll, of course, still be interesting to see where he will end up. Will it be with the Petes back in the OHL? Will he get traded to a certain other team? Or maybe will he go for that rumor where he ended up in like Junior A or whatever? Someone from Twitter made the rumor like that. Something that, of course, didn't occur, but still, it's going to be interesting to follow Merkley, and it'll be interesting to see who is in the next batch of training camp cuts as we approach quite close to the regular season, only about 10 or so days away. Class dismissed.